I realized how much now, after a year and a half, 2 years in the industry, how much I didn't know back then that would have just cost me a ton of money. Like I don't see how we would have been successful, to be honest, unless Dylan just bossed up and did most of it himself.
This is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else with your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grinzik. With me, as always, is John Cohen. How we doing?
We are good. I was right before you popped on the screen, I was talking to our wonderful guest about how brokers are completely fucking insane. They believe that nothing has changed in this world. And I got as aggressive as I can on a deal. I offered. And the seller, he's saying it won't take a penny less than X. And he's trying to make the play for why it makes sense. And I'm like, dude, it's just not going to work. Mm-hmm. And, it's a broker trying to put it together. And I give him credit because he's a hustler. I like him. I think we'll do a deal with him eventually. And he's a hustler, which is good. But they're crazy, man. These guys are nuts.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I don't think we've done a podcast since we looked at it. We found the first deal with a seller who's just like, property's not really distressed, but is just going to get out for a loss. Bought it a year ago. He's probably going to take a 10% haircut, give or take. And they're just basically saying, hey, we're going to sell, we're going to get out and regroup and see what happens. So it was very interesting to see that. And on a large scale, I mean, a $50 million plus deal, not a one-off mom and pop. So it's definitely a strategic exit. And I think it'll be incredibly interesting to see if there's more that follow, or this is just, a one-off guy with a different perspective on things. So I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that we're still not there yet. I don't think people are willing to part with it. I was always on the impression this is not going to be a long-term thing, like 4, 5, 6 years. I always said, sub 24 months. I still believe that. I just think that, I think the deals will start coming 6 to 8 months down the road, not 2 months down the road. So I know we're still pretty early into this, but I think stuff has to shake out. I think some people have to get kicked in the face a little bit more before they realize their property's worthless, or worth less, not worthless.
Yes.
But, no, I think, we'll get there. We'll hang in there, but,
absolutely.
We will see.
Beautiful. No, I tend to agree. Maybe we'll touch on some of that stuff with our guests after we bring him in and let him introduce himself. So with that being said, Chris, thanks so much for joining us, bud.
Certainly. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, awesome. Take a few minutes, just tell the people who you are, your background, and what you do. Certainly.
Yeah, I calling in from Tahoe, California right now, but live and work in San Francisco, California. Grew up in the East Bay of San Francisco, in a little town called Pleasanton. It's kind of white suburbia, an hour east of the city. And am the youngest of 4. I grew up to 2 parents who have owned a small business together for around 25, 30 years in kind of the blue collar sector. So that taught me hard work, certainly. But my dad, it's a lot of manual labor work. Without getting into the details, I realized quickly that I didn't want to have to use my hands or my body to make money. And that it was great because it taught me a lot about entrepreneurship, but it again didn't want to work eventually with my wife like my parents do. I realized it was hard to kind of separate business and me and husband and wife, although they love each other and it's great. So did a lot of entrepreneurial things when I was young, but ultimately my first kind of foray into the very beginnings of entrepreneurship started when I joined a network marketing company when I was in my teens, probably around 15 or 16, before you had to be 18 to join. I didn't, hit any home runs there, had some success, had probably more failures, but what was great is that it taught me a lot about mentorship and how important it was to surround yourself with success. And really, that was the first time that someone said, Chris, I see something greater in you than you see in yourself, and which was really cool. So not shortly after, I got given a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki that really changed a lot of my philosophy around personal investing and all that. For those who have read, it's a phenomenal intro to personal finance. And that kind of sparked my interest in real estate. I wanted to hedge my bets. So in high school, I ended up studying for my real estate license, wanted to get into, try my hand at the real estate sales business on the residential side. And I got my license right when I graduated high school. Did that for about 2 years in community college. My 3 older siblings all did the community college route and then transferred to good schools. And I thought, why not save money, stay living at home, and try my hand in starting a business. So the first year was miserable. Really just learned how to cold call from the initial mentor that I had. And then through a few different, transfers of mentors, I ended up working with a guy that was one of the top agents in the firms in the East Bay. And he ultimately helped me sell roughly $10 million my second year from leads that I had cold called and built in a little Excel spreadsheet database. So that was really my first big business win. Gave me a lot of confidence. Was a great story to then foray with good grades. I transferred to UC Berkeley into the undergrad business school there, which really was kind of felt like Willy Wonka's golden ticket to be able to open up my mind and the world of opportunities of really any occupation that I kind of wanted to go for. I felt like I could try at least, learn about investment banking and consulting and all these opportunities, and kind of had my head spinning for about 2 weeks when I got there. Ultimately decided to stick with real estate. Really, really glad I did. Pounded the pavement and wanted to learn, what the opportunities in commercial real estate were. And all I knew is from my Robert Kiyosaki days that I wanted to be I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to own a lot of real estate. So I figured I probably should work for a big owner. I ended up meeting after tons of just coffee chats and kind of talking to older, smarter guys. I ended up getting an internship and the job that I have now, which is at Mosser Capital, which is probably, I would call it a medium-sized real estate private equity firm based in San Francisco. We own about 3,500 rent-controlled apartment units, which rent control, I know now all of California is rent controlled, but we were buying stuff before the, January 1st, 2020, when everything became rent controlled. So yeah, that's our specialization. I've been an investment analyst here, focusing on acquisitions and asset management for roughly 2 years full-time after working there my full-time senior year. So it's been fun.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's going to give people a ton of insight. And I think it's going to be interesting to compare and contrast a little bit between, the three of us. I think you and I had somewhat similar paths, except I ended up with John, who's probably not nearly as sophisticated as the company you work for, which could probably be a good thing and a bad thing. So we'll see.
It is, certainly.
But it'll definitely be interesting. So you worked there your senior year, and then you've done it a year out of college. Is that right?
So I basically didn't, when I had coffee with the CEO, I was like, I'm really just wanting to learn about opportunities in the industry and wanting to kind of get my feet wet. We're really looking for a junior internship. I've kind of felt like I was 2 years behind transferring into the school when all the other kids basically had 2 years at a great school and GPA to show and other internships possibly. So I knew I had to, what I lacked on paper, I had to show in person. So he was probably the 45th, just coffee chat that I reached out to, a successful real estate guy, Cal alum. He gave me 10 minutes of his time. He basically said, you have no finance experience, which you need to do well in this industry. And, but you have sales experience. We're buying a bunch of buildings in Oakland, California, right around what's called Lake Merritt. For those of you that aren't familiar, it's a nice it's actually exploding. It's right across the bridge. It's probably 20-30 minute BART in. BART is the, transit system here. Mm-hmm. And he's like, we're buying a bunch of buildings. Why don't you start leasing those? If you do well for a few months, we'll consider it a junior internship. I did that. It was, I really, frankly, I thought there was nothing lower on the real estate totem pole than being a residential realtor. And I realized there definitely is. You can, and that would be, renting apartments to millennials. So I did that, crushed it for about 4 months. And he's like, wow, you definitely showed hard work and that you can get shit done. And yeah, we'll take you in junior summer. So I did that. It was still, the company's changed a lot. It's going from kind of it's only, the institutional arm of Mosser companies that is Monster Capital, is only probably 6 or 7 years old now, and they've acquired those probably 2,000-ish units in those 6 years. But for that, Monster Companies is kind of a legacy family-owned real estate firm that has roughly 1,000 units and probably a few hotels in San Francisco. So I'm happy to get more into that. But basically, to answer your question, the junior summer internship went really, really well. We expanded to Los Angeles, buying 8 buildings with a new institutional partner. And then they kept me on because of that kind of success. They basically just gave me co-star and a list of brokers and said drum up some deals. And meanwhile, we're trying to get a new capital partner, and it ended up working out. I got an acquisition bonus that kept me wanting to work for them after closing those LA deals, and then stayed on part-time senior year, the full year, and then graduated in May 2018. Traveled for a few months, and then started August 2018. I've been working there since. So probably closer to 2 years full time, but not quite.
Gotcha. I think that's awesome because I talk to a ton of people through podcasts, social media, meetup we do and stuff like that. And several people are always talking about getting started. And oftentimes the conversation is about going to work for somebody else to gain experience. Very similar to how I did, very similar to how you did. Unlike you, basically only took a couple meetings. And I'm really curious to dig into that process because I think so many people are wanting the outcome that you've achieved, where you can be under people that are doing it, around people that are doing it all day, and really get that experience and either continue along that path and stay in that same environment, or potentially break off on your own, or extrapolate what you're doing day to day into your own personal real estate holdings, which I think is just great in the real estate and real estate private equity world that I don't think you can do in a lot of other industries.
Totally.
So can you talk a little bit more about how you started meeting people, what those conversations were like, how you stuck with it, to get to meeting 40, 45, which is the one that actually bore fruit for you?
Yeah, I will say that definitely the school I went to really, really helped. There's kind of, for those that aren't super familiar, I would just personal opinion would say probably USC in California, Cal Berkeley, and Wharton are probably some of the top, and tons of schools on the East Coast that I have no idea, but are some of the best real estate schools. If you really want to take the traditional route, you totally don't need to take the traditional route. I kind of think of it like there's the traditional path of going to a great undergrad school, maybe even getting a great MBA, and then go working for a big institutional real estate firm, either on like as a limited partner or on the general partner side. And you can do that and work for as long as you want for them until you feel comfortable. I think a lot of people do that. I don't necessarily think it's the best way, especially it's not accessible for most people. I never viewed myself as like good at math, good at finance. And I just knew I needed those skills to play kind of in a different lane with a lot higher income potential. That is like the investment world. So really when I thought about it initially, I saw, real estate sales was on track to make a good, like earned income, several $100,000 a year. My mentor was making over $1 million a year, and that was great. But it was, I saw that people usually invest in what they know. And a lot of those realtors that were making big 6-figure incomes, didn't know, they knew how to earn money, which is great. Most people don't know how to earn money, but they didn't know how to keep or grow money, which Grant Cardone talks a lot about, which I think is super important. So they were buying, the best realtors would own, like Joe Frazano is his name. He owned like 10 homes paid for around the world, which is unreal. That would be a obviously success by any means, but he was also working still like 70, 80 hours a week. Granted, he loved it, but I realized, what is this guy great at? What does it take to be great at? And a lot of kind of sales roles like that is networking, marketing, connecting with people, sales. What skill could I add to then leverage those soft skills that I already felt like I was good at? I needed finance skills. So for me, if you're not already, a lot of the process and going about it is like knowing kind of what self-awareness and knowing where you want to end up at the end. And I can't extrapolate for anyone else, but for me, I knew I wanted to be, again, a big owner. I knew I needed those fundamental skills. I don't know if I would have, frankly, if I didn't get into, I only applied to 4 schools after community college if I didn't get into the one that I really thought was the best ROI and it was kind of worth the time, because I was already making in community college part-time, frankly, as much as I make now full-time, which is insane. If I didn't know like where I wanted to go, or if I didn't get into Haas, I would have just stuck with real estate sales. It would have been a completely different career. I probably wouldn't have gone to college. So for me, really, that felt like the ticket to, it really expanded my mind and gave me a lot of self-belief. Like, yeah, you can get into this industry that is the scary world of private equity, whatever, venture capital, investment banking, any all those large kind of scary finance roles felt like a reality for me. Now it's certainly possible to do that if you don't go to a top target school. I'm happy to talk about that, but what's I think maybe more interesting is I largely undervalued the experience that I'm getting now at working for a large owner. I think, and let's see, feel free to cut me off, but to add on to this, when I had a lot of kind of paradigm shifts when I got into Haas. A lot of kids were chasing the ABCs, accounting, banking, consulting.
What is that, Haas?
Haas is the undergrad business school, Haas School of Business.
Gotcha.
A lot of kids were just chasing accounting, banking, consulting, and you kind of had to choose what you want to do. A fraction of the kids wanted to go into maybe tech, and an even smaller fraction wanted to go into real estate. So we all kind of knew each other. But what I didn't want was like my biggest fear was to be stuck in corporate America for 5-10 years and then try to, like what most people do, and I think is not the best path necessarily, to be a hot take, is go work for someone for 10, even longer, 10 plus years, and then go try to start your own real estate investment firm. Whether it's in multifamily, which is probably the simplest product type, or others that I don't think takes that much experience to be skilled at and to, add differentiated value in. I didn't want to get stuck, but I knew I needed to get, big institutional experience, really to build my own kind of resume as well. So I forget how, but I came across like Michael Blank's podcast, Vinny Chopra's podcast. That's how I met Dylan Marma. We connected my last semester senior year, and really we're talking weekly about moves that we were going to make. This is before he joined Jake and Gino, before he left Jake and Gino, but that was all before that. And where was I going with that? Through all those podcasts, I realized like, I'm now on the traditional path, but there's a whole untraditional path. Like you don't have to go to a great school. Like you can certainly multifamily. It's simple enough to, if you're a smart, hard worker that is willing to beat the pavement and learn investment finance skills, the hard skills I'll just sum it up in, that didn't come naturally, certainly to me. You don't have to go work in corporate America for 5-10 years to start your own investment firm. So I was initially going to start a firm, like a multifamily investment firm. With Dylan before he joined Jake and Gino. And we had plans to do that until he got the opportunity to join them, and it was premature for both of us. So I said, do what's best for you. He joined them and had a great run with them. He could speak more on that, but I then just went to go work for Moser. I accepted a full-time role, and I'm now on this track. But point being is that there's lots of ways to get in the industry. You don't have to go to a top school. I realized that my senior year at Cal, am on the more traditional path now, but there's no one track to get in and do well.
No, I think that's so important. And that's, I think, a theme that comes up a lot as you start to talk to a lot of people, and as you start to listen to different podcasts, webinars, different things like that there's so many different ways. And that's why I was excited to have you on, was because you being in a little bit of a different space, do get the sense that private equity tends to be a little bit more private than a lot of people that are doing it themselves, have their own firm, things like that. So definitely wanted to get your insight. And I think it's very interesting to hear you talk about it, because I draw a lot of similarities myself of, as I started doing this, just for your context, and I guess anybody who doesn't even know, I got started trying to flip homes with my mom and my cousin, failed at it for several months while I was working as a stockbroker, hated that job. And then just through networking and actually partnering with John's cousin, met John, we passively invested in a small deal he was doing, and then joint ventured on 2 smaller deals. We actually just sold the last one, last week, which was awesome. But then the opportunity came up to, go and work for them full time. And it was kind of the same thing in the same time where it was, hey, I can, continue to try to do this on my own on the side with my family. Or I can now step into a role and try to continue to learn more, because it's always, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. You have that little bit of, hey, I can, get more by drifting behind somebody else's wake. And then you can either continue on that role, do it on the side, continue on that role and, keep going, or, eventually go off and do your own thing. And I think that offers a lot of opportunities that a lot of people find value in, but often struggle to get into. And that's why I think it was awesome that you kind of shared your experience, because it is different than a lot of people. Not everybody has access to it, but I think it's also definitely a possibility for a ton of people. But I also think it's interesting that just because you went to this school and it opened doors, which is just all networking and connections is, whether it's a school, a family member, a networking event, DM on Instagram,
Totally.
it's all, all loosely the same thing. It wasn't the first connection that you met. It was number 40 or whatever it was. So, I think I don't want anybody to come away from this and say, oh, it was Berkeley, I don't have access to that. I can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have those connections.
Yeah.
Connections are just open doors. Doesn't mean you're going to get through. So I think that's credit to you. And I think that's really awesome to hear. I'm curious to hear though, now being, let's say 2 years into it, and you'll never know what would have happened if you had obviously decided to start and do it on your own first. But I'm sure you can have a rough idea of what you could have see possibly going. Looking back, do you think you would have made the same decision again? Do you think you would have gone a different route? And then how do you think it would have been different for yourself and where you'd be today?
Yeah, good question. So the initial plan was not to just do it on my own from the get. It was really, I'm going to go work for Mosser. I'm going to learn the ropes there. I'm going to be it'll allow me to live in SF. There's a ton of money that you kind of can, again, to the traditional non-traditional kind of analogy, like traditional path is a lot of like institutional capital that you need essentially a track record and a lot of experience and kind of industry respect, and just you have to show institutions that you know what you're doing over a career of 5, 10 plus years to be able to raise from them. On the other hand, on the untraditional path, and there's pros and cons to both. I think about this a lot. Untraditional path, you might not have access to institutions and you can't scale as fast, but that's totally not a bad thing necessarily. Like there's high net worth individuals or even just accredited or sophisticated investors that, you'll need to talk to, meet more of them, raise more from more people, or raise less from more people. But there's a lot of pros to that institutional partners like don't offer. That's a whole other conversation. But your question, could you repeat it one more time?
Yeah. So there was a couple parts, but basically like if you go in the route you went versus going a more non-traditional route.
Yeah. So the plan was like for me to be the kind of underwriter, finance guy, capital raiser in SF, and Dylan was going to be like the boots on the ground, like deal finder in Atlanta. Senior year, I heard on all these podcasts, this market's hot, the Southeast is hot, Florida's hot, and like multifamilies, just no like real data, no real science to it, and wanted to better understand what made a market hot. So I put together this big Excel spreadsheet that just looked at like 30 different of the top kind of multifamily gateway markets, and across 30 different like metrics, whether it's the simplest being population growth and job growth. And that was when I was starting to get good at Excel and really kind of did a lot of conditional formatting just to like see trends and better understand from a numbers perspective, I see why this is an attractive market. We decided on Atlanta. Dylan had just moved there from San Diego to move in with his uncle or something. And he had started a meetup that grew pretty fast. You know, that's one great way if you want to just get in front of a lot of people and really position yourself as a thought leader. We thought about starting a podcast ourselves together to get more credibility. There's tons of ways to do it. I'm not the expert on that, certainly. But point being is I was imagining to do this part-time, like, oh yeah, I'm going to hustle at Mosser 50, 60-hour weeks and then somehow find time to underwrite deals that Dylan is finding and sending me. And then we're going to raise money in the interim. Thankfully, I'm actually glad that didn't work out. I realized a few things. One, that it's not buying market rate multifamily all over the US is not necessarily my most ideal real estate investment company. If I was just to dream up, like, what do you want your real estate investment company to look like? For a few reasons. And two, I don't think we would have been successful, to be honest. I know we're both young hustlers that want to like get shit done, but like I kind of said a little bit ago, like I really discounted the experience and the industry experience and like the skills. I didn't realize how important, and Tom Bilyeu talks a lot about how important skills are to actually, they allow you to do things. They allow you to, simply put, they allow you to do things. So I realized how much now, after a year and a half, 2 years in the industry, how much I didn't know back then that would have just cost me a ton of money. Like I don't see how we would have been successful, to be honest, unless Dylan just bossed up and did most of it himself, which, you know, he's only a year or two older than me and didn't necessarily have much more experience than I did. So I'm glad I
just want to interrupt you because I think it's really important. I couldn't agree more. You know, I've been with Toro now almost 4 years, which is crazy. And, you know, the amount I've learned over those 4 years has just been crazy. Things I don't think I would have known or learned without making the mistakes that would have probably hurt deals. And the mistakes probably would have been larger because we've made mistakes. Every investor, every investment group makes mistakes. It happens. But it's mitigating those risks and, you know, being able to pivot and act accordingly. So I totally agree. I think I've learned way more than I think I probably would have through those experiences in a much quicker time frame, unless somehow I was able to raise, you know, this crazy amount of money to go out and, you know, go buy the same number of deals and do it on my own. However, I think because I had less track record and, similar to you, less access to capital, that would have made it significantly tougher. So I think it's interesting to hear. I do think I would have been able to make it work. But I think it just would have taken a lot longer, a lot slower. You know, would have had to live at home and do things like that. So probably very similar to you. I was just like, didn't really want to live at home, you know, kind of wanted to, you know, live a life a little bit and, you know, get the experience on the side. So for me, it was also invaluable. But yeah, I think you can definitely go and do it yourself. I just think, especially being young, but not having a huge track record, you know, the ability to raise a ton of capital quickly is not easy. But the ability to raise small amounts of capital early on, I think, is very easy. Well, pre-coronavirus, obviously now it's a very different environment, but you know, there was, you know, a ton of capital out there that was looking for real estate, that was looking for multifamily deals, you know, that's willing to take a chance on, you know, young guy or girl who's a, you know, hustler and looking to make things and do good things. You know, I think almost anybody with enough time, dedication, and persistence can raise a little bit of money. But I think to really scale, you know, that takes a lot more experience, track record, et cetera. Yeah, I love that. Really, how I used to think was, you know, of course, I'm sure everyone wants to be successful as soon as possible. I thought, like, you know, I would love to. I realize it's going to take 3 to 5 years to really, any business you start, at least that amount of time to like probably do well, depending on a lot of things. But I was like, I would love to crush it in my 20s. I would love to like be a principal in my 20s, and it's certainly still possible. I'm 24 now, but my old thinking was like, well, you know, if I don't start like early, you know, 21, 22, I won't be able to really get there. Like, it'll go slower. Or like, yeah, I viewed it initially like, if I go work for someone else for 2, 3, 4, 5 years,
and then start a company, it's going to be, my path will be a lot slower. Now what I realize is like, I think there's a kind of a perfect medium. I realize now if you go work for someone for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, get essentially all the hard skills that 90% of the hard skills and really learn the business. Big key is not on your own dime. You'll be actually be able to go farther faster. It's about building a bigger foundation, about a bigger house that is like your skill set, your network, your understanding of the business, etc. So I personally think, after just thinking about a lot and kind of analyzing different people's stories and the big real estate guys, how they achieve success, almost none of them, unless they've just inherited a ton of money and learned the business from their dad, which I didn't have, probably most people don't have, is they went to go work for someone that was doing almost exactly what they wanted to do, if not exactly what they wanted to do, for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I think the happy medium is at the associate level after like 4 to 6 years. I personally think you get enough skills, and I've seen it at least at Monster, of associates that are in their late 20s or mid to late 20s that understand the business almost better than some of the VPs that are in their mid 30s, and even like at points the CEO in his 40s. So there's no like perfect formulated path. Everyone's got to do it this way, but like I really think going to go work for someone else for at least a few years is like will really take you further faster, when it didn't seem like that for myself.
So I think the foundation that you can lay by working for someone is, it can lead to exponential growth. I say it all the time. I didn't do it, right? And, I didn't go to college. I went to college, but I did not go to college. I went to a small school, Queens College. I didn't go to the major institution. I wasn't, the social butterfly in high school with a million friends, and, networking was not my forte. I happen to be good at what I do, but it takes effort for me to, at a networking event to, talk to people. Like, it's not just second nature, right? Like I have to consciously think about it, but I joke around with people all the time. And, I'm on the record on this podcast all over the place. And, listen, I'm not a big believer in college, but the thing that I also say behind that is, listen, if you use college to the right degree, whether it opens your mind or you meet the right people, and it will put you in the right positions to get that experience, that's what I think it makes the most sense for. If you go to college and think you just because you graduated from Harvard, whatever, you're going to be a billionaire, it doesn't necessarily work that way. Having those doors open help dramatically, but it's what you do when the door is open. I didn't work for anybody. I sort of looked at it the other way. I was a commercial broker, and I looked at it the other way by saying, wait, why am I splitting my money with this guy? They're not providing me with anything. So unlike you guys, I went the other route. But I think that, going back, would I change anything? Abso-fucking-lutely not. But if I know what I know now, starting, I might have picked a different path of, okay, hey, let's go work for this guy. And, the joke, what I joke around all the time is when I meet somebody and I see what they're doing and it's something I want to do, I basically look them in the eyes and say, listen, whatever you're doing, I'm going to do it better than you because I'm going to work harder than you. And that's not, I'm not smarter than you. I'm probably dumber than you. But if I see what you're doing, I'm going to do it more. And I can speak to the other side of the coin, and a 100% agreement with both of you guys that, for the right person, not being, the front line and the head of the, head of the show. If something goes wrong, it's 100% on you. What you can pick up and the tips and the tricks working for a larger company, and not, we are not a large company, right? We are, we have a good time, but the way that you've gone about it, I tell young kids looking to start all the time, listen, you can be the CEO day one, and you can do really, really, really well. And you could be, the richest person in the world, or take the back seat, get that education, get paid to learn and fine tune your skill, and then go out. And, there's a million companies that breed people like us, right? There's, a ton of construction companies that, you work for them 5 years, 10 years in, and then you go on your own, you start your own construction company, or you work for a multifamily firm 5 years, 10 years later, you start your own company. And it happens all the time. And I always recommend to younger guys, and I'm only 33, I'm not 20, but I didn't have anyone at 20 saying, hey, go work for this person. And if I did, I mean, my parents tried, but I was hell bent on, no, I'm going to figure it out on my own. And luckily, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But I think the approach that, Chris has taken and that or Chris's have taken, I truly believe as a younger guy, whether you partnering with Dylan or not, and I love Dylan, good kid, you're going to cut your teeth and get punched in the face way more on your own dime. And listen, that's why, 3 years into it, you might be saying, fuck this, I'm going to go do something else. But when you put a good foundation down, I joke about it all the time, you can build any house you want. If your foundation is solid, you're good, right? That house could fall down, break, crumble, whatever it is, but you're going to be able to rebuild it. Whereas if you're not 100% sure, that's when shit happens. So I think that the honesty, knowing that I want to work for a company and build it, is something that people have to look in the mirror at, because everybody wants to be Warren Buffett, but nobody wants to put the work in to do it. And that's where, knowing that I'm going to go work for this guy and learn is super important, because you could pay any coach, any mentor, any amount of money. It does not mean it's going to work. If you go work for someone and get paid to build, you're going to have a much better base coming out into the real world. So I think it was, it's good to know that. And for someone that did not do that, like I said, I wouldn't change it, because I am who I am for what I've done. But at the same time, if I was as smart as I am to now, and that's just this much smarter, I probably would have maybe changed something. But it's good to be aware of that. I think knowing that from a younger guy getting in the real estate world, whatever it is super important.
Yeah, I think what's interesting too, and I want to clarify, is as we're talking about this, work for someone else, and then, you can use those tools somewhere else. It doesn't mean you have to go start your own lookalike firm. You don't have to be a multifamily investment firm or a single family flipper business. You can take those and do things on the side. So whether it's, you save up for a few years and you get, 20, 50, 100, 200 grand, you can go buy a duplex or a 10 unit or a 20 unit with your own money. You don't have to then go work with investors, because you may very quickly realize working with this company that you hate dealing with investors, whether they're institutional or one-off investors, just may not be for you. You'll do it as a W-2 capacity or 1099, whatever it is, but you may not want that for your personal life. You may not want the call on a Saturday when you're at your kid's barbecue having to deal with a pissed off investor because your financials are off by 5% or 10%, whatever it is. So you can then take what you've learned and directly apply it to the same thing, just on a much smaller scale by yourself without leaving your job, which I think you don't get with many other jobs, if any, that I know about, whether it's private equity, if you're a real estate agent, I don't know any. And if you guys can think of any, that's great. But I mean, you can literally take the principles you're learning, directly apply it to, a 10 unit you can buy for yourself in a similar area, and you're going to do the exact same thing just on your own. So I think that's another thing people need to think about, where you don't have to be the head of a company by the time you're 35, 40, 50, if that's what you don't want, because there's a lot of the population, if not most of the population, that probably isn't cut out to run a business with multiple employees. And that's perfectly fine. If you know that's you don't have to do that. You can continue to work for somebody. You still have that income coming in, and you can, build your life around it and invest around it accordingly. So I think that's also super important to differentiate. I am curious, Chris, as you've now been in it for 2 years and your plan was kind of, sounds like, hey, you're going to start my thing in the future. Has any of your future plans changed? Are you looking at things differently? Are you looking at different types of asset classes now for yourself? What's that like?
Definitely. Yeah. Before I answer that, I would want to say, John, I totally agree with everything you said. Love the input. And I would say that, you didn't have no experience. None of us on the podcast here are telling you is like to go in with zero experience. Like, it sounds like John, a real estate broker, is very relevant experience. Like, I don't want to be misconstrued and say, like, you have to go work for an investor to like be an investor. I think real estate brokerage, if you want to take a more entrepreneurial route, you can learn the business very well that way as well. And anecdotally, I actually have found that more real estate brokers will end up working for themselves than even people on the private equity side. Like I remember when I was interviewing with a lot of like VPs and senior guys in institutional private equity real estate, I would ask them, oh, so what real estate do you own? And these guys have done really well for themselves, know the business insanely well. And they're like, oh, I just have my house. I would love to buy like a duplex soon or something like that. Point being is, and then when I would talk to a lot of the commercial broker guys, like because they're closer to the deals that are typically smaller, but because they're more entrepreneurial, they have more time flexibility because of being a broker. In a lot of ways, you're working for yourself unless you're on some giant team at East Still Secured or something. I just found that if you actually wanted to be an entrepreneur in real estate, going the brokerage route and learning the business on the sales side is just a good, if not maybe not better, but just as good of a way to do that. So yeah, you certainly don't have to. And I would say it's generally easier to break into brokerage than it is on the buy side right away. So that's another route for those that don't want to.
100%.
So.
You're going to get a good skill set that you can turn into a platform that you want it to be, right? And you can still do your brokerage if you want to buy a deal. You can use the same skill set, and I think it was a great skill set. And you're 100% right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Chris, to answer your question, kind of how am I thinking about it now? Yeah, wow. This whole crazy COVID thing we're going through is definitely starting to, as I'm sure most younger guys, just really younger anyone, is kind of like shaping that are wanting to be investors, are like probably shaping their ideology. And how it's kind of shaped mine is, I was really, I guess my favorite product types have been multifamily and retail, both for it's kind of cheesy, but the user experience, personally, I've got the most memorable places and like most attached I've been to real estate are like very chic, cool retail spaces. Retail's not doing too hot, and then the future growth projections there aren't the best. And then multifamily, like I really love, luxury condo building, which I don't think would be the best business necessarily to go into. So it's like, maybe those were my passion. Like if I could do anything, any product type, kind of any types of projects, would be like luxury condo building, or like, what Rick Caruso does, who built the LA, the Grove in LA. He's like, we're probably worth over $4 billion. Granted, he was handed a ton of money from his dad. But to answer your question, I realized I don't want to just do, like I said, garden style, like multifamily investments. Although I think it's a great, like probably one of the best businesses over the next 20, 30 years to bet on within real estate, that like, if you don't want to lose money, you want to do well for your, get safe 10, 15, even 20% returns. So buying existing real estate and with multifamily and growing markets is like, it's going to be hard to go wrong. And that's great. And I want that certainly to be a part of my portfolio that can really weather any storm. I'm sure you guys are probably doing pretty well through all this craziness. We're doing well, but a lot of our tenants, while they're in San Francisco, it's workforce housing as well, but I think our delinquency rates are higher than what we're seeing on the national averages. Because a lot of our tenants are in the like hospitality space, retail space, greater than probably your guys' properties. It's just like general guess. But point being, I also always love real estate development. Like I love the idea of, I really think of it as like almost venture capital, where and kind of a more pure form of entrepreneurship within real estate, where you're taking, you as an entrepreneur that has an idea that wants to create something from nothing. We're all of us, I think, aren't doing that if we're not building ground up. We're buying someone else's creation, which is great. It's a lot of, risk is very consumer with reward in this business. And there's no right or wrong way to go about it. But I would love to build as well. Eventually, certainly not probably starting out because of all the added risk and complexity to it. I don't work for a developer. We don't do any ground up development, but that's something that really, really interests me. And kind of like the right ratio, maybe being like 9 buy, after talking to a lot of successful developers, buy 9 properties that are existing, build 1, buy 9, build 1, something like that. And then in terms of like what product types, yeah, anything related to housing, I think is probably going to do pretty well, especially on supply constrained markets like the West Coast, East Coast, and other markets like that. But I'm thinking kind of with all the volatility we've seen recently, like I can't imagine working your whole life and being in your 40s, 50s, 60s with a family and like taking so much, risk, whether it's like in your career related to a lot of things that just the idea that all you've worked for can come like crumbling down. If you're a big developer and they say that if developers that build bigger projects every year will eventually go bankrupt because you're not all bound to work out. And you can read some insane stories about that of legendary families in New York and elsewhere that have gone bankrupt from one giant deal that were billionaires. So I know I don't want that. I really resonate with the get rich for sure instead of get rich quick. It's really why I chose real estate. So that all to say, like I'm attracted more to like the real estate product types and business models that will be here in the next 20, 30 years, whether that's like life sciences, R&D, life sciences, or a lot of industrial product that it's doing really well right now. I think it will probably continue to do well with trends in e-commerce and whatnot. And then multifamily. So I don't know. While I love riskier approaches and product types, I think I'm personally more inclined to take less risk and stick with product types that are going to be here and doing well more likely than others in the next 10, 20 years. So it's not a really clear answer, but that's where my head's at.
No, I think it's good. I think, we talk about it all the time. None of our buildings are sexy. Nobody wants to go visit them, but they do well. And, they provide on paper, at least, and historically for us, good risk adjusted returns. And, they've done very well. And, there's always going to be a need for quote unquote affordable or workforce housing. We're not rent stabilized, but we still play in the same similar field. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody that's in the same or similar space would love to have that sexy creative component to their portfolio. It's just going to come down to, like you said, your risk tolerance. How much do you want to bet on that? And, the more risk you put on something, the greater chance there is to go bust. So I think that makes a ton of sense. Awesome. I think that's a phenomenal place to wrap up. I think you gave people, especially, obviously younger people are going to resonate with this a lot, but I think anybody who is newer or looking to build up a business is just going to get, a ton of really good insight and glean some good information and maybe revisit a couple of thoughts. So I think it's going to be impactful to a lot of people. So Chris, thank you so much for coming on. If people want to just touch base with you, get in touch with you, follow along if you do anything online, where can they do that?
Yeah. Feel free to email me if you want, chris@chrislford.com. I'm actually launching kind of like a personal branding website, just that'll talk about real estate, general entrepreneurship, Ironman triathlon stuff that I'm into, and all things me. So that'll be launching in the next few months, chrislford.com. You can find me on Instagram, Chris__Ford. LinkedIn, I'm everywhere. Just Chris Ford, Monster Capital. Yeah.
Beautiful. We'll drop that all in the show notes below. Guys, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you're not already subscribed, it would mean the world to us if you would. And if you are subscribed, it would mean even more if you would send it to a friend, a coworker, or family member that you think would like it as well. Chris, thank you so much again for coming on. This was fantastic.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.